and confirm/invoke the resolution adopting procedures for public meetings, which allows us to operate in a hybrid format today. And first on our agenda is the discussion of Policy 4.8 website. So we sent out, we had a good discussion about this last month, where we sort of identified some bullet points or topics that we wanted to make sure we covered. David and I worked through, and you've had a chance to see this over the last week or so. Just a starting point with some try to translate some of that into some language. And we can continue to try and shape some of that. So some of it is sort of written as language, and then we'll get to sort of the second half. You scroll down briefly, David, to the content considerations where there's more of kind of for discussion where these need to be fleshed out more as topics. The previous, so this is essentially a redo from the previous version, or the current version, I should say. The current version was last reviewed 10 years ago, so that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. Right now, our schedule is sort of every 10 years, so we want to try and future-proof. Later, hopefully this year is the year we'll get to a, we've been talking about a reorg of the policy manual as a whole, and as part of that, we've talked about picking, setting a review schedule per policy, so that it's not just a 10 years across the board, and then something that is tech-oriented is probably going to be, we'll talk about moving that to a 5-year or even a 3-year type of schedule, so we don't have to worry quite as much about future-proofing, but that's just some of the context for right now. Another big picture, just sort of a philosophical approach of how do you approach these policies. We're at the policy or the board level now, and the board's role is to set priorities and identify sort of high-level goals, and not necessarily and talk about results. Like, here's what we want to see as a board being accomplished by the library, and not as much on a sort of how to do that is less the role than what do we want to see accomplished. So see some people nodding heads, but there is a spectrum, and there's some gray areas sometimes, and so there's reasons why you want to fall on one side of the spectrum sometimes and on the other side of the spectrum other times. But in general, David and I took kind of more of the approach of here's the priorities and the goal that we want to see, and a lot less of what we saw in the current version of where there's going to be a committee with this many people and it's going to meet so often. That can all be then, after the goals are identified for staff, that can all be covered in as much detail operationally as you want by staff, by the relevant, ultimately David's responsible for that, but he'll delegate to various staff. So that's just a few words of sort of, we chose so far in this case to land on the side more of high-level guidance and a little less of specific details. And I guess I would say, since I'm big picture, I would also put in everyone's mind who is and this is a question that also came up, who's the audience, or what's the scope of this? So I think the audience for all policies, there's a couple. One, if we're setting goals for staff, and I think that's mostly what this one is, then the audience is the staff internally. It's other trustees, not only today current trustees, but also future trustees who are as part of their role of governance. They're saying, hey, how well are we doing at carrying out, the things we said we wanted to do? So we want this to be easily interpretable by people who are not in the room today, but there are other trustees. But again, those trustees are not working on a day-to-day level, they're working on a goals and priorities level as well. So we want them to be able to understand clearly, hey, these are the goals and priorities, and yes, we agree, and yes, we're doing a good job at that, and so forth. It's also in a lot of cases the public. And so some things like, hey, we're going to have a program policy. The public needs to know, well, what kinds of public programs are you having? How do you choose which programs to have and which not to have? Why are you having this one today? And we can kind of point out, well, this is what we all agreed on, and here's what you need to know. So in terms of the website, I think it's probably a little less oriented toward that, but that is going to come up on a couple of bullet points here as well. What do we need, from the standpoint of what we want to communicate to the public and agree with the public? What things about the website do we want to tell the public kind of in a policy form, and that might guide the level of detail we put into a couple of these bullet points. So any comments or questions there? I just want to put a little bit of context into what we thought about that led us to the approach of this sort of high level, some of this high level. Okay, so given that, we'll start reading a little bit. And to me, thinking about it, there's really just three main bullet points if we're setting priorities for staff. Is that A, the website is super important. It's the entrance for, we have, I'm sure there's tens of thousands of unique users every year, and I'm sure it turns into millions of visits. And each one of those is we're asking for time and attention from our users, and we're leaving an impression each time. So it's an important key. I think we're struggling with the word if we're reading the first sentence here. It's the virtual entrance to the library system, and it's a key organizational, I think, feature is sort of what the best one I've been able to find, but a better word for thing. So please help with wordsmithing on that as you're, and then it needs to work good, and it needs to look good. I mean, so everything else is just sort of a fancy way of saying that with the right level of scope or detail. So the first, again, this intro talks about that it's important and what's the purpose. So the main purpose is providing access for patrons or users to the catalog and other resources and services. And then we're saying, okay, because that's important, staff, we want you to have a website and keep it up to date. And here's sort of the characteristics, high-level characteristics that lead us to be able to say, hey, we did a good job of providing a website that looks good and works good. So I will stop my soliloquy now. And David, if you want to guide, just kind of talk through these first half of bullet points, or anybody chime in for any bullet point.
And I should say, I told everybody, Thomas and I were talking about the technical issue of having everybody mute, but this is more of a discussion. So go ahead, everybody can pitch in at any point here. I think that's hard to do if everyone's muted, so you can feel free to unmute. Do you want to start with the wording up there in the first paragraph?
I do like the chat I see from Sarah Elizabeth. Gateway also is a good word. Gateway
is a word for a web presence. So the JMRL's website is a key organizational feature offering service, resource, thing, gateway that serves as a guide to the library system and provides access to the JMRL catalog and other library resources and services. I like gateway a lot too. Any other thoughts on words there?
I like resource.
Tony likes resource.
Resources duplicates the other resources at the end, and gateway sort of almost duplicates entrance at the beginning.
I would make the second one other library offerings and services.
I kind of wonder if you couldn't, I think it was gateway that made me realize that maybe this is almost trending towards being repetitive, and if you cut all the way to the guide part, you could just say JMRL's website is a key organizational guide to the library system and provides access to the JMRL catalog. And simplify it.
Okay, so I heard a couple things there. There's Tony's offerings, and then Thomas was suggesting starting here, JMRL's website is a key organizational guide to the library system that provides access to the JMRL catalog and other library resources and services. So it'd be losing as the virtual entrance to the library system.
I think guide is more accurate than, I'm sorry, I think resource is more accurate than guide. If you, I mean, it's a key component. If central, the building here to central is a resource, right?
Facility, yeah.
Well, you know, we've been referring to the digital branch for a while, so how does
Mhm.
that building that we're using here, right?
That's kind of what I was referring to. Is it's kind of a branch, but it also is because it's to the catalog and everything else. It encompasses all, and then the digital resources. It's a hard one. That's kind of where I've heard gateway before. Is it's a gateway into our services.
You could say it as a virtual gateway instead of entrance, and then you get that word in.
Well, I do agree with maybe getting rid of that first part of the sentence, that it is somewhat redundant and wordy. JMRL's website is a key organizational resource that serves as a gateway to the library system and provides access. Because I don't know how much of a guide it is, or exactly what.
I like wherever that landed. So if you were going to strike that, I think, David.
Oh, yeah, that was the intention.
Key organizational resource. I would put that.
So we would land on
and then offerings. I would go with resource gateway offering.
resource.
For the Mad Libs. Those would be the Mad Libs.
It's Mad Libs.
Source that serves as a gateway to the library system and provides access to the JMRL category and library offerings and services.
Pretty much.
I mean, do we need and services at that point? Like, aren't services also offerings?
Yes.
Thank you, Tony.
You got two ands in there.
The organization resources is a gateway to the library system and provides access to the JMRL catalog and other library offerings.
Which, maybe the first and should be which.
Or which or the? I'll go with your. Tony says which, I believe.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, teamwork. JMRL's website.
Actually, wait a minute. Now we have two that's. I think we still might need a which in here somewhere.
Serves as a gateway to the library system.
Well, okay.
I think I'm okay with two ands there.
I think we go which, that, and. A resource which serves as a gateway to a system that provides access and other. It is a Mad Lib.
Struck in white to the library.
Organizational resources serves as a gateway to the library system. I mean, how about,
So the
or
first and
just
turns into that.
JMRL's website? Two sentences, is that? No?
No. Just change that and to that. There you go.
JMRL's website is a key organizational resource that serves as a gateway to the library system that provides access to, yeah, I don't like it. I think and better there. Because it's serving as a gateway to the library system
Yeah.
and it's providing access.
You're right, yeah. I think it's okay.
All right, Tony, we'll have to circle back to that one.
Someone to diagram that sentence.
And we'll get more eyes on it. Of course, the full board will have a chance to look too. So, okay, so the bullet points that we have up here, I think these are the main things that Mike and I discussed as a distillation of what this committee talked about right before the end of the year last year. And we got some good feedback there from Sarah Elizabeth, so we can discuss that. I think the first one focuses on providing information about the library and access to its offerings. It's a bit of a duplication of the first sentence, but it's definitely, the goal here in this list is these are the things that staff are going to do. So the board is saying like, hey, we don't care how you get there, but like these are the things that are going to happen. We want to make sure the website focuses on providing information about the library and access to its offerings. We don't want our website to turn into, an advertisement for whatever else is happening around town. So any objections, thoughts on that?
That is true.
All right, so the second one was it's functional, clean, well organized, easy to navigate, modern in terms of style and layout. And then let's go through the next few. Is visually appealing and conveys a positive and professional image of the library's brand and is stylistically consistent and follows JMRL style manual. So Sarah's point here, she says this list can be somewhat subjective and actually describes what's currently called the user experience in design. Said the point could be something like follows the guidelines and standards of user experience design and possibly link to the defining Wikipedia page. We probably wouldn't link to Wikipedia, but it's just that's like a librarian thing, Sarah.
Okay.
I think the intent here is it's supposed to work. If we're just looking just at only the first one, which is the first comment, the intent is supposed to work good, whatever that means.
Right.
And that's definitely subjective, no matter where you get, wherever you draw that line. There's going to be some subjectivity. I think it works good for me, but it doesn't work good for you. I can't figure it out.
Which I think is we do want it to follow, we want the users to have a good experience at the highest level of the term user experience.
Yeah.
It has to be functional in order for the users to have a good experience.
So we could put like focus on attention to user experience or focus on user experience. I don't know if I get quite as jargony as UX design. I understand that.
People know user experience.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
If you follow the first link that I posted that gives a definition of user experience design, not the Wikipedia, the other one. I mean, it also has subjective language, but it provides some language that we could use to list this out. But I just want to get away from terms like clean and well organized, easy to navigate. All those sum up to user experience design. Those are the mandates. I mean, the industry over the years have taken all these sort of phrases and distilled them to user experience design. So if you went to a web development company and said, I want you to adhere to user experience practices, they're going to follow information architecture and follow design principles based on this. Do you see what I mean? So it is jargony, but it does convey to
I absolutely agree that it's concise and it has a meaning to people who educate themselves about what the meaning is. And that I try to kind of lay out our audience is broader than that. I'd like a trustee to be able to get back from us a distillation of the important parts that are encapsulated by user experience design without having to follow through a link and educate themselves. And the same goes to the extent that a public is interested in this.
So I like
if I were writing it for staff, if I were writing a text spec for the staff, if I were the IT manager writing, then I think everything you're saying makes perfect sense. Of hey staff.
sure.
I really think the audience is a little more. It's more of a general audience that we need to kind of make sure that we get.
I like some of the language in that link, though. Some of the human language here, like meets the needs of the customer, simplicity and elegance.
Yeah. So we could simplicity and elegance is very similar to the clean.
Yeah, very.
Right. I've done enough web development with clients to know that when one walks up saying clean, that can mean so many different things to so many different people that trying to follow that it's challenging. Then again, I mean, a lot of these adjectives can do that. So
What about intuitive? I mean, that's something that to me means something. You want the person to be able to see it the first time and be able to do the basics, like what's the library's address, what's the phone number, how do I put a book on hold?
right, that's that well-organized concept. Easy to navigate and well-organized would fall under
That's already-
intuitive. Yeah. And that's information architecture. So yes, again, putting it more into everyday terms, intuitive would be good.
What was that? The clean would be simple and elegant. Because I have a similar concern about modern, because modern people might have maybe a differentiation, different, people might think cutting edge versus modern, so I understand what we were saying, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we just don't want it to get,
We don't want to be
where it looks
stale.
out of
It
date.
looks like a
Yeah.
GeoCities
So
page.
there's a good way to say that, a better way to say that.
Well, see, that's where you get to the argument of avenue.org is very intuitive and simple to navigate and very clean, but it
Right.
does not look modern. So it's that give and take. Some people prefer that. Why do people like our classic catalog versus the new catalog? Some of it is the difference of design or simplicity of the interfaces. So you just want to watch out for that kind of stuff. Not that I think we're going to police this too much, but
Go ahead, Jenny.
Can we refer to the definition that Sarah Elizabeth is talking about, like, follows current user design principles, and then you could say and you could list some of those to give people an idea of what that means. But that way, whatever the state of user design is, we're saying to our staff and to our public, we are up with that.
So that sounds like Sarah's suggestion kind of linked to it, but that runs a little bit counter to your thoughts.
I think we're addressing the concept of the currency or the word modern. So if we use current instead of the modern part, adheres to current UX design principles.
I think we should spell it out. UX is not.
User experience design principles, yeah.
so another site that defines, I mean, you could Google define UX everywhere. It's up for a lot of interpretation. One site lists it as value, function, usability, and general impression, which those four, I mean, you could say UX design, which follow value, function, usability, and general impression for the customer.
I think I'd rather lump it all under one thing there.
Okay.
So I'm pretty happy with this. I do really like the simple and elegant. It's functional. It meets the needs of the customer, is well organized, easy to navigate. Maybe get one of those. Adheres to current user experience design principles and is, what did I say?
Simple and elegant.
Simple and elegant. I mean, again,
Yeah.
those are about as subjective as you can get, though.
Yeah.
How about functional, simple and elegant, comma, meets the needs of the. I was going to put that after the colon, but either way.
That works too.
Pretty happy there.
I think that works.
What do you think, Sarah?
Sure, that works.
Functional, simple, and elegant. Meets the needs of the customer, is well organized, easy to navigate, and adheres to current user experience. So UX design, that phrase has been around for a while. Are we worried at all that in 5 years that phrase is going to be gone? Talking about future-proof.
It's been around for 20 plus years. It actually, the first time it was coined was in the early 90s when HTML was first being introduced.
I would make the D lowercase. UX can be up.
Okay.
Meets the needs of the customer. I mean, I realize that's the generic customer.
Do you want to say audience? Because we have so many.
Yeah, that sounds better to me.
How about also?
I mean, technically in user experience design, you would say user, and that's such a terrible, that's a terrible way to talk about people. You're all users.
So patrons is our
That's our go-to.
library jargon.
Yeah, but you're a user, I'm a user.
I think. How's that, Tony?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay, good, nice work. So is visually appealing and conveys a positive and professional image of the library's brand. So we had, Mike and I had a long back and forth here. And then is stylistically consistent, follows the style manual. Sarah Elizabeth had a comment of these 2 points. The first point is subjective. Both can be summed up to being the same thing. Maybe combined to 1 point and say maintains stylistic consistency, adhering to JMRL style manual, aiming to convey a positive and professional image of the library's brand. Go ahead, Mike.
Really what I was going for here in the third one is we want it to look good. And it's important to look good because that leads to subjective impressions for someone who does visit frequently or someone who hasn't visited before. You're going to see, does this look inviting, up to date? Does it look, does it look like other quality? It's kind of the concept of quality here is what I'm trying to get across, and not in this. This is my intent is a general point that we need to pay attention to the impression that the website leaves on anyone who visits, the organizational impression. So the word brand in marketing kind of conveys that. I don't want in this bullet point to get too caught up in whether it's orange and green and blue or not, because orange and green and blue may or may not actually be the right answer that leaves the really good impression. So I do like. I don't want to confuse the word brand with the style guide. Those are two. I'm using those in two different ways. So we talked about, Dave and I talked about image versus brand versus. I guess the word impression is not there, but maybe could be. So I'd love some help with that part of it. How do we just convey in this that it needs to work to convey a really positive impression? And yes, that's subjective. And it's going to be subjective for everyone else, but to me, that's a really important priority, is that it looks good in a way that leaves a positive impression.
So I think the main thing is, Sarah, you understand the distinction, because I think I agree with Mike there too, that we've got like two different things in these two different bullets. One, we want it to look good, and the other, it needs to follow whatever style manual we have at the time.
That's kind of why I left the positive and professional part. In what I was suggesting, coming from the perspective of the web developer saying, okay, I need assets to apply a design to a website, I look to the style manual, which I guess is born out of branding, because branding is more of a marketing thing. But from the web perspective, the style manual is that. So I do have a hard time teasing the two apart.
The word brand is problematic there, but I don't have a better, I understand and agree with what Mike is trying to say. It's not about the brand meaning like, the colors or whatnot. It's about the concept of the library, kind of, what JMRL means to people. But I don't have a better phrase for that in the third bullet.
So you're trying to convey a positive professional image of the library system, period?
Could you just end that with image?
Yeah.
Visually appealing conveys a positive and professional image.
It could be impression of the image if you wanted to do. Yeah, maybe the word brand.
Yeah.
I mean, visually appealing is kind of extra. We're just trying to convey a positive and professional image
Of the library.
of the library. I mean, that's if I'm hearing you correctly. And then, yes, separately, you could say, and by the way, you have a style manual to help with the actual design.
Mike?
I mean, I do like visually appealing. So for example, to me, something that leaves a good impression. Today, you see visuals, you see photos of, the library at sunset, you see photos of people, that are with really good lighting, that are using the service and enjoying it. And I think if you were creating a marketing website so you go to a marketing website for Albemarle County, okay, you see a lot of that sort of stuff that leaves you, a visual image is what leaves those impressions most powerfully. And I'd like to have a nod, if that's the technique that results in a positive impression, I'd like to do that. I'd like kind of a nod or an understanding that that's but my point is, none of that is in the style manual. The style manual doesn't say your photos of patrons will have really good lighting, or anything like that. There's no mention of that. It's just when you're describing the brand as such, here's the colors and fonts and shapes you use. But yeah, it's still a broader concept than.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I bring up avenue.org because the design is so simple and looks outdated, but it gets a lot of rave reviews because it is so simple and does not have a lot of flashy stuff to distract or to cloud. And another thing we talked about with the Find It catalog, we have a scrolling bar that maybe is too much for it. Or the beta website, I'm sorry, we were talking about that before. So I want to be careful not to box us into maybe what is the current design styles and stuff like that. I mean, I know what you're trying to convey. I don't know how to necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think anything in the wording there is telling staff like you have to use this tool to get there. It's just saying we want it to be visually appealing and we want to convey a positive and professional image of the libraries. I think I would be okay with losing the word brand. We're just trying to have a positive image of the library. So then that's up to us to figure out how best to do that.
Okay.
Would impression versus image get closer to where I'm trying to address here, or is image the right thing?
Oh, jeez. It's going to be a long day. It's visually appealing and conveys a positive and professional impression of the library.
Or am I overthinking?
I mean, I think removing the word image removes because we aren't also, we're talking about images to some extent. That helps maybe.
Okay, image. I'm not hearing any.
No, I think I like impression more than.
Yeah, I like impression is
For that reason.
separates a little bit more from the style manual because.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I like that.
And
Visually
maybe
appealing.
this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please. Go ahead.
Well, maybe this kind of points to the fact that the style manual could be augmented to include some guidance about imagery and stuff like that. If we're pointing to that as, and it might even say something about that. It's been a little while since I've read it.
Yeah, I
So-
definitely think the style manual needs an overhaul as well. But we just have to set here, this. I don't believe we have a policy that says JMRL needs to have a style manual. This might be the only place where it says that. And this was born out of the time in which the web designer was the same job as the PR specialist. So those two things went hand in hand at that point.
I'll tell you, working on web stuff, having a style manual is really helpful. It's,
Okay, I hear some consensus there. Maintains timely and up-to-date content, okay. Incorporates accessibility considerations and incorporates privacy considerations. So Mike and I had a long back and forth about this too, about how you need to have those things. And do we want to lay them all out here, which is it's a tall order, basically, to get that all done, especially, well, just in general, if you look at other websites, it's like whole reams of web about that. And then also, what are our obligations to the public here? You know, where would a member of the public go if they wanted to know, well, what kind of data is JMRL taking from me, and what are they going to do with it? So I think there's a bigger question about, like, oh, we need to make sure we're addressing those concerns that we're assuming the public has. The smaller question for us to deal with as a body is whether or not this is the place for that. So Sarah, also some feedback here, says accessibility is definitely something that should be listed as a specific policy, since it essentially is an ADA rule. To state it in web dev terms, adjust the language to something like adheres to web accessibility guidelines as defined by W3C, and possibly link to the guidelines, which would be,
Oh, that's weird.
maybe this link instead.
That might have been a Google thing.
Yeah. This is a different page, introduces WCAG 3. It's in progress at this point. And you can see, like, there's a lot of information here. So I am, sorry, I can't get to the tabs. I think I am in favor of something along the lines of what Sarah is suggesting. Like saying, here's the set of rules and we're going to use these for accessibility, but that doesn't really cover the other things. It means, this says incorporates privacy considerations, and that means that the board is telling me to tell the staff, make sure you're thinking about these things. But if you're a member of the public and you want to know, well, what's the answer to that, this wouldn't then answer that for you.
Yeah, it would have to be a separate page on the website that we didn't spell out that you have to have. And I think we even have one, we found one.
Yeah, there is one now, Sarah, right? You've got,
Yeah, let me pull it up. It's been a while.
this is not to put you on the
A
spot.
lot of websites have a privacy policy. Yeah, it's right there. Bottom right.
Our privacy statement. And, you know, I was just trying to look up what Trumba has, because we do collect information through our registrations, though I don't know what we state or what they state in terms of privacy. No one's ever asked me yet.
Yeah, not same for Aries and Sierra, you know, like so many offerings that we have, we're collecting something at least. Your name.
But we have to, right?
Yeah, right. But we should be transparent about that. We're not asking for your social security number.
Right. And we do certainly use cookies. Yeah. Just looking at our privacy statement page. Yeah, that's this is standard and covers what we do.
So I would think that maybe we could even say incorporates accessibility considerations, and then something like Sarah suggested, you know, adheres to the web accessibility guidelines as defined by, I guess, W2, whatever the current standard is, but this would mean it would be.
You could just say W3C.
Yeah.
They're an international recognized body. So, I mean, that's who you would look up.
And then for the incorporates privacy considerations, we could say something, Mike, along the lines of, and shares those with the public and updates that on a regular basis, something like that, you know, just so that the direction from the board is like, not only do you need to do this, but you also need to share it with the public.
I think it's fine. Would we end up landing? So on many websites, you see in the small print at the bottom, you click through and it says privacy policy, and that's where it would be shared. And then it ends up with that word policy.
Yeah.
I mean, so certainly we could draft and adopt a policy level document that's a privacy policy. Right now it's a privacy statement, which I'm comfortable with also.
Would that be a privacy policy just for web offerings, or would that then supersede our like patron confidentiality and
Yeah,
other
it could be, so it could be sort of,
overarching.
you could do it either way. You could make a separate thing that's like digital privacy, and then keep confidentiality, or you could revamp confidentiality. But again, it just goes back to what, so I think you're saying, I think I'm hearing you say, we do need to communicate something to the public.
Something, yeah.
So then at 30,000 feet again, if the public needs, should the policy manual be the place where patrons can go? Should they be able to know they can go there to learn everything they need to know about interacting with and using the library? I think in part of the reorg, that was sort of kind of some of the
The
thinking.
conversation.
Why not link to it if that's gonna be?
Somewhere, why, you know, what,
Just like with the accessibility, you're gonna link to that because that is the standard.
You could say incorporates privacy considerations and communicates those through the privacy statement on JMRL's website and link to the privacy statement in here. So that someone would.
That's
look
just
and
one
see
more
what
link
we
that
get
Sarah
to.
needs to find and change when we switch everything over to the
Yeah.
website. That's not, you know,
Well, or not link to it, just say
Yeah.
via the website's privacy statement. So I feel like in general, as a internet user, right, you're used to scrolling all the way down to the bottom to look for a privacy statement if you're interested in finding that. And so
Yeah.
having it in a similar place that it is for other sites makes sense to me
Yeah.
for findability.
and that doesn't mean that it couldn't be a board level policy. That's just
Yeah.
links down at the bottom there. I
right.
think I'm comfortable with it as a
Yeah.
statement here. I think, Mike, if the policy committee wanted to take this on, I would recommend we would take on, similar to the reconsiderations, like an overarching privacy policy that could
Right.
deal with, like, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about with privacy.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about photography in the libraries, we talked about patron confidentiality
Right.
and this. So I think that's something that we could put in on the back burner, you know, as a
Okay.
potential good thing.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with this level. I would just take out the website privacy statement. These bullets are already saying the website will do these things, so we're already under a website.
All right, and Sarah, I don't know enough about this, so tell us a little bit, the Web Accessibility Initiative.
It's just the guidelines that there are different nonprofits that work off of these guidelines to establish standards for the coding and for formatting of code to be the easiest for web readers to read and convey. And also, I mean, it touches on color contrast comparisons for colorblind levels, several different colorblind levels. This is just, this entity establishes the guidelines for different measurements about how accessible your website is. And I've already started to have a meter on our site to kind of give us a score about how we're doing on both current site and on beta. We're at about 72% adherence, which means we're doing well, we could do better. And so I just saying that we're following the standards, or we tried to adhere to the standards here, would be enough to say we tag images right. We just code things as well as possible for screen readers, which is essentially, I mean, that's the main one.
I guess my only thing is this the you know, the accepted governing body on this? Because this is based on another conversation we had about linking to a third party body. Like, what if, you know, is this gonna, in 2 months, there's gonna be something on here and saying every image must be purple, you know, or is this the, you know what I mean? Like,
This is the governing,
Yeah,
this has been
authoritative.
the resource since the 90s. And I mean, maybe not linked to them, but maybe just reference per the,
Accessibility Initiative.
yeah, the W3C initiative. I actually was going to suggest another nonprofit, but they point back to the W3C, which makes sense because this is the entity that also has all the tutorials about basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript again, to write everything as accurately and correctly as possible. So no, they're not going anywhere, and they update to modern technologies. So they're going to be your best resource for the most modern CSS and HTML.
Okay.
So I would say from a governance standpoint, I just want staff to think about accessibility and do the right thing,
Right.
which is clearly is already happening, and which is great. I don't love the word adheres because I don't want to box. So these standards are the right thing. There's a gray area. We don't have to do any of it. We should do it when we are doing it because we should and because it's the right thing. But I don't want to box staff in and say, hey, you gotta. I found bullet point section 4 subsection 2 that you didn't follow, so we did. So we're not following our policy. So I'm just trying to, nudge people in a direction. So I would even say some of the guidelines developed by W3C or other standards bodies, which maybe there is not really another one, but that today, but that would future-proof. Yeah, can we broaden this out a little bit? I mean, so yes, I like the idea that we're showing awareness of that there are industry standards.
Guided by the standards
I
of
like that.
Yeah, guided by standards.
That way guided is like not as committed.
And it may be redundant, but and we say accessibility really easily, but actually technically it's web accessibility. Do you want to specify that, or are we good just leaving it as accessibility?
I think in light of what the fact that it's the website policy, I think we're
Okay.
accessibility considerations guided by the standard. Okay. Mike, we're at the 5-minute warning. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously we're not gonna. So this is great that we're, we can sort of draw a line here, and I think we've got a decent consensus on the wording, which is important, and it means something. So we're gonna have to come back with, and maybe we can do a little of this by email. What are the boundaries in terms of what content we see on there? So, and David, let's skip to the very last one, because I think that was the bottom line is, do we want to draw a box and say no third-party links, or are some third-party links okay? And if so, then we need to have some guidelines on what kinds of third-party links are okay and what might not be.
Yeah, we want something that Sarah can point to when somebody says, like, hey, put up this link for my resource, for our community, that she can point to say, here's the reason, yes or no.
Or vice versa, if we allowed third-party links and a branch manager, there's activities for kids right now,
Right.
Which sounds pretty innocuous, but if someone said, hey, I don't like that activity for kid, why is it on your website? We need to be able to point back to, well, this is why it does fit or does not fit sort of the guidance that we established. So,
and I think just as a brief preview, my initial instinct on this is to remove the third-party links that aren't library offerings. So if it's not something that is a library database or a partner program or an organization that we're partnering with on something, that we would maybe cut this back a little bit. But I know, Sarah, you have thoughts on that too. We talked about it briefly the other day. So this is I think the big thing to talk about.
right. So I would give time with managers between now and I guess we have 2 months for this.
Sure. Yeah, we can bring it up next week at our management meeting.
Some of that feedback. Sarah, do you have a 60-second comment? If you're, you have a comment, you can fit into 60 seconds to give us a preview of where you're thinking.
Well, I agree with David, kind of cutting it down to only One thing you said that's very specific is partnering third parties. So we linked to the VA book, but they are partnering with us right now. We linked to PBJ Club, PBJ organization. They're partnering in a program right now. I want to make sure that we allow those and we don't box ourselves in. I did come up to the question of, we're partnering with the VA book and they're being sponsored by other stuff like Dominion Power. So do we cite Dominion Power or not? And I mean, I just want guidance. And if we want to make this policy general and stick at, according to the Web Content Committee, and then have us internally decide what that is, we could do that. So this policy doesn't specify anything. We have a committee that decides the procedures for the content. Does that make sense?
That could be an option.
A lot of people care about this topic in the library system.
Right.
Well, I think it's a good suggestion for us to talk about it in the managers meeting next week. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to change the link status here to everybody can edit. And with the assumption that everybody is only going to work on, oh, it's already that way, huh? That people are only going to work on this content consideration section, that we're pretty happy with everything above that, and then we'll touch on what's below that at our next meeting. Okay, at
Okay.
2:58.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
We'll throw out a marker, David. When I hear that word partner, it always reminds me that we don't have anything. What is a partner? Who gets to be one? Now you can have a link as long as you've achieved this partner status. I would want some transparency for someone in our community who might want to be a partner.
And it's not.
How did so-and-so get to be a partner and I'm not?
There's a forum for program partnerships.
Hello. Mr. Gentry, how are you? Good.
Hey, Lee.
Yeah, that sounds good. When we do the, announcements, maybe. Thank you, Wendy. I'll be right back.
Yeah. We're kind of regrouping and adjusting. We had a long. I intentionally kind of kept that dynamic.
I guess I know who I am, so I think I'll turn it this way.
When we were out.
Yeah.
What? No. Hope you didn't trip over anything here. Packet? It's an audit in there, so you can leave it here. They're up here.
Take one because
Right.
my printer didn't work. I always like to write up. Okay.
We're running a few minutes. Policy committee went a bit over.
And I'm listening on. Yeah, audio. I didn't want to leave the car in the parking
Oh,
lot.
good.
I'm nearing the end.
No, I haven't read it yet. I saw it.
Is this the wrong one?
Yeah.
Not, and that's what thing looks like.
Oh, I'm sure it's not. but
Yeah, I just grabbed the wrong one. What was the change?
There was no usurping.
Actually, at this.
Worth and not. I had the news on at home all day and
It is.
so I didn't.
No
accidental. Yeah, I heard.
It's so fast.
Kathy, can you hear us? I couldn't get you in as a panelist.
I haven't switched my glasses.
I'm seeing Kathy as a panelist.
Yeah, now she is. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, hopefully she can hear Thomas.
Okay. Do we have a quorum? The camera view is very small. I think I see.
Yes, you
Okay,
have a quorum.
wonderful. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's see. We are still operating under the County of Albemarle's Continuity of Government Ordinance, allowing for these meetings to take place remotely. Today's meeting will be in a hybrid format with some trustees meeting virtually and some in person at the North Branch Library. Thank you all very much for being here today. If you've had a chance to review minutes from our last meeting, do we have any changes that need to be made or a motion to adopt?
Thomas, briefly, can I say that the handout includes the original version without the change from trustee President Powers or President Unsworth, and that has been changed in the official minutes there. So it's
Very
a typo in
important.
your handout.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, David. Do we have a motion to adopt?
I so moved.
I move that we adopt the minutes as recently described.
Thank you. All in favor?
Yes.
Is that all? I believe that works. Okay. Does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to make before we get started?
I do. It's so weird being here instead of on Zoom. I'd like to introduce one of our board of supervisors. And this is Willie Gentry. He's come today. He's actually, Louisa has what they call a liaison to the or to the board, to the JMRL board. And this term, it's Willie. And I would just like to say that it's really a fine person to have, because he is one very astute and diligent supervisor, but he also is a frequenter of our library, and his wife, I think that's her second home. So, so Willie's here with us today, and he wanted to come and meet everyone and just say hello and introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Willie. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything you'd like to say, please feel free.
Just very briefly, again, thank you for all you do for particularly for Louisa County. The library is a very special place to go for people in Louisa. Really, the most important person in my family is probably my wife, Debbie. She's been treasurer of the Louisa Foundation for about 30 years. And spends a lot of money in the library, like a new room, parking lots, and some of those kind of things. She's here, but I couldn't get away from the book area. Anyhow, I did want to comment that we've had our first budget meeting already, and we did approve the requested amount from this board for next year's budget, which was a total of $391,956. Again, thank you. Again, thank you for what you did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gentry. Any other announcements from trustees or? Oh,
I
yes,
have one.
Yeah.
I know that we're going to talk a little bit about the library's participation with the Festival of the Book. But I also, as I do every year, I'm going to be on two panels. The first is on the 13th. And if there's any aspiring writers, we critique your first 100 words. It's a speed critique. It's a writing group that I'm in. And that will be virtual on the 13th. And the other is a panel called Accidental Detectives You Don't Want Coming After You. So it's a mystery panel for any mystery fans. And that's actually in person at the City Council chambers on the 19th. At 12 p.m. and one is actually a library mystery. So